Woman Who Chat is sponsored by Grow Radio. Grow Radio is an online radio station dedicated to bringing you a different podcast on the hour, every hour. I'm proud that Woman Who Chat is played on Grow Radio every Tuesday at 3 p.m. and Friday at 8 a.m. and to be a part of their podcasting community. If you want to listen to the station, explore their shows, check out many of the blogs to improve your podcasting skills, or get your podcast onto Grow Radio, head over to growradio.uk today. Welcome to Woman Who Chat, and today I'm chatting to Nicola Rowley of NJR PR. Is that right?
It is right, yeah.
And I'm not going to do some long introduction. I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself and tell us what you do.
Okay, so, well, thank you, first of all, for having me with you. So my name's Nicola Rowley, and I started off as a journalist. My professional life began as a journalist, but even like rewinding even further, when I was 6, I sat down and I wrote my first ever story about a cat, a witch, and a spaceship. And that actually became a seminal moment for me because I realized how much I loved storytelling. So journalism always felt like it was the next natural step for me to progress to. So I became a journalist so that I could tell other people's stories. But when I was at university, I discovered broadcasting, and we had an option. We could do writing or we could do radio at the time. And I fell in love with radio, and I would do work experience at my local radio station. Back then it was Essex FM. And I literally spent a summer going out, interviewing people, driving around in a radio car with a little mast that used to go up and be able to take things back to the studio if you were out and about. And I was able to basically just learn my craft as I went along over that summer. And then the final year of university, I was one of the first to walk straight out of university. We finished the course on the Friday, and on the Monday, I was straight into working at a lovely little radio station called Mix 96, where I used to read the news in the afternoons and come up with stories and everything else. And it basically went from there. And I was very driven, very ambitious, and very, right, I have a plan and I'm going to do this. And so I mapped out my plan. This is where I want to be next. Once I've done that, then I want to go here. And then once I've done that, then I want to go here. And that basically translated into, eventually I want to get into London. So I started working as the deputy news editor for a Heart FM in London. And then from there, I went to BBC Radio 1, and I used to read the news at weekends for Chris Moyles and overnights for John Peel and Annie Nightingale. And like, it was incredible, except I was doing lots of kind of crazy hours. And I was in my early 20s, and I didn't really think anything of giving up those nights out or giving up the things that everyone else was doing. They were off going out and getting drunk and doing all of those things and partying. And there was me working early shifts, late shifts, overnights, everything else, because this was what I wanted to do. I moved across to Radio 5 Live, and then I moved into working in TV as a producer. And they said, well, if you can come up with some stories, you can go out with a camera operator, and then you can actually film them, and then you'll be on TV. Music to my ears, of course, because obviously I love telling stories and coming up with stories. So that's what I did. And so I was always going out and about with a film crew and coming up with these stories, which I loved doing. Eventually, when I left the BBC, I was working as the entertainment reporter for BBC 3. I mean, it sounds really glamorous, but in between the standing there on the red carpets and speaking to celebrities and covering all of the various things that you do in the world of entertainment, I just couldn't see me doing that when I was 50. So the PR kind of world came calling, because I looked at it and I just thought, I think I could be more creative, but I can also still present. And I think there's a way to be able to tell stories. I hadn't quite worked out how to do all of that side of things, but worked in agency, and then moved my way up. And my biggest client at the time was UK TV whilst I was working in the agency. And as soon as a job came up with them, I moved across and was working there. And I worked there internally for 6 years. And I did everything from flying all over the world, launching TV projects and programs. And it was so much fun, like so much fun. And I loved it. But then my little boy came along in 2014, and I realized that actually that kind of life of doing all of the things and being at your desk from 8 a.m. till 6 p.m, it just doesn't really mix with being a mum, and a mum suffering from separation anxiety when I tried to go back into work. So I took redundancy. I ended up taking a maternity cover contract back at the BBC, but this time working internationally in PR. So I was working across Central and Eastern Europe and the Middle East, looking after BBC Worldwide. So we were launching everything from Top Gear in South Africa, like sending the stick around the race circuit in South Africa 1 minute. The next minute I was in Dubai, then I was in Doha. Again, didn't really work with having a 2-year-old, but because I knew that there was an end in sight, it kind of just helped me get through it in terms of my mindset. And then one day, one of my best friends called me and said, listen, I'm going to be leaving my role as the head of PR at Thorpe Park, and I really need you to come down this weekend and oversee the X Factor auditions at Thorpe Park. Can you do it? Well, I mean, talk about perfect like scenario for me, like going around the park on a golf buggy with Nicole Scherzinger and Simon Cowell. And of course I can do it. I can oversee it, make sure everyone gets the coverage that they want, but also look after the celebrities, all of those kind of things. So I oversaw that. And then when the job was there, they said to me, would you like it? And I said, yes, please. Thank you very much. Because it was only 20 minutes from my home. And it meant that although there were long hours and it was a lot of like out of hours and everything else, I found that I could juggle it better because the distance was easier and I was only working 4 days a week. So I had a day back from my little boy being in nursery 5 days a week. He was then in there only 4 days a week, which I loved. And I knew that was going to come to an end because he was due to start school age 4, and he literally just turned 4. And so he was one of the youngest going into primary school. And I was just like, I need to be the mum on the school gates. I need to be able to find a way that I can do all of this at the same time. So I quit my job. As much as I loved it, I quit my job, I know, so I could be there for him. I felt like he'd been in nursery 5 days a week right from the get-go, and he hadn't had enough of me. And it's all very well working, but there had to be a point where I put him first, and that was it for me. So I went in, I started freelancing, and yeah, and then from there I eventually started my own business, NJRPR, and it's gone from there, and it's just completely taken off.
You sounded like you had a determined mindset when you were younger. You mapped out that career path, which not a lot of people can at uni. They haven't got a clue where they want to go, but you strategically took the option of the radio presenting because you knew that would be the stepping stone you needed. Were you given much support with that decision?
In terms of?
From the university, did they guide you, or was that just Nicola?
It was very Nicola. I just think I've always been very determined to do things. And I think when we go all the way back to that 6-year-old that wrote that story about the cat, the witch, and the spaceship, it ended up being over 1,000 words in length. And because my teacher at the time had never seen anything like it before, she said, will you stand up in front of the whole school and then read out your story? And I was like, yeah, okay. Now, for some children, that they'd freeze on the spot and then they wouldn't want to do anything like that. With me, I discovered my second love, which is presenting. So putting myself in front of a microphone and talking to people and going out and speaking to people and doing all of those side of things, it was something that came quite naturally because I'm a very people's person. I'm very much led with building relationships, speaking to people, making those connections, and really understanding where others are coming from. And I'm really good at listening to others as well. I think it's a really important gift to have. A lot of people don't actually really listen. If you bump into someone in the street and you say, oh my gosh, I haven't seen you in ages, how are you? Normally people are asking that, not because they mean to do it, but like they want to tell you how they are as opposed to anything else. Whereas I always give people that space to be able to say how they are and listen to what's going on for them, because it's really important. It's really important to have that. So for me, no, I don't think I really got much guidance as such. I mean, the whole story behind how I got the work experience in the first place is, I mean, it's a story in itself. So I was originally thinking about taking a year out at university, and I was looking at, did I travel to Canada for 3 months and live in Canada for 3 months? Because that was an option that we were given at university. And then another 6 months work in journalism. And so I had applied for the work experience at Essex FM on that basis. But what actually happened was there was a change of head of news at Essex FM. And so my letter had landed with them, and they got in touch and they wrote to me and they said, well, could you get in touch with us and we'll have a telephone conversation? And I realized on the telephone conversation, they didn't have a clue what had actually been agreed or what is actually going on in the background. And I just thought, well, I could use this to my advantage. So what I will do, thinking on my feet, I will tell them that what's been agreed is that I will have 2 months worth of work experience and I will come along during the summer. And what that meant was that I could then continue and just finish my degree within 3 years, but I'd also got the work experience. So it's a big tick all round. So I said that, and they said, oh, well, then you have to come along. And I was like, great. But what actually happened was, because they were so short-staffed, I ended up starting to get paid as I was doing it. So I was still at university, still like doing all of my lessons and everything else. But during that summer, and you have like 10, 12 weeks as like a summer break, I was working at Essex FM and getting paid a day rate for a journalist, which I thought was absolutely brilliant. And anyone else starting out in journalism would think that it was a pittance, but for a student, it was brilliant. And I was like amassing all this money as we were going through. I left university not having to like have any debt whatsoever because I'd done all of this. But it was just literally just having that moment where you realize they haven't got a clue and I really could make this work to my advantage. Do it with a smile and it works out.
But that's showing your strategic thinking, I think, and using the opportunities and creating them into things that could work for you. And not a lot of people can do that. I think it's planning ahead. I mean, I worked all through my uni summers because I had to, because I got 2 small boys. But actually, I thought this is an opportunity. This is CV building. And I think too many people think, oh, I want the summer off, I'm going to travel and everything. But I think the sooner you can build your CV, the better. The more you can get on that CV, the better. That story you wrote when you were 6 years old, you still got it?
I think we do somewhere. I think it must be up in the loft. I wouldn't have got rid of it, not voluntarily, because that story really does mean the world to me. It really does. It's like I've kept all of my English books. So I've got all of my English books, and I've definitely got my books where I was doing anything creative at primary school as well. I've kept all of those, but especially the English books where I've written stories as I've like gone through the years. And I used to love my English teachers. I was very supported by my teachers. So We used to have a fabulous teacher when I was at primary school called Mr. Lester. And then my first English teacher when I went into secondary school was called Miss Roberts, and she was amazing. She saw something in me. I don't know what she saw in me, but she saw something in me. And immediately she was just like, you need to be doing public speaking. So I used to represent the school at public speaking. And then when she left, I was devastated because we got a new English teacher, and I was just like, oh no, but English is my favorite. And what happens if this teacher isn't as good? Oh, he was brilliant. So Mr. Dearmer came in, and I loved him being my English teacher. So he nurtured my love for everything. And the more that he would write, I think there was one part in my English, like after my English homework, he written, are you ever going to do an average piece of work in your life? And things like that for me at the time were really like, it just cemented my love for everything to do with the written word and storytelling and books and everything else. So yeah, I think like having that was really important.
Yeah. So let's come up to present day. So you've started NJR PR, and I came across you just over a year ago. And I think what I was impressed with was your ability to see into stories, to see those angles that can be used for PR. And I think that's the key. A lot of people send off press releases. This is me. This is what I do. This is what I've done. This is what I've achieved. And that's not what it's all about. It's about the stories behind that, isn't it? So if you can just give us a few insights into that, would be really helpful for the audience.
Yeah, it's always about looking at the angles, like you say. So journalists inherently work in stories. They're always looking for a story. So you have to think, like if you are putting yourself forward for an opportunity or you want to be seen in a bigger way by a publication, you need to be thinking about what is it that's going to appeal to their readers, their listeners, their viewers, whatever it is, so that they're going to pick up your story and then run with it. And there are angles that will appeal and there are angles that won't appeal. And with everything to do with PR, I think we need to re-educate ourselves. We look at PR, like you say, people send out press releases and they just think, oh, great, that's going to get covered. But at the end of the day, I think as business owners, we have to look at it from the point of view that it's never about us. It's always about other people and the people that we can reach through what it is that we do. And if we put ourselves out there and we tell elements of our story that people can resonate with, then what that does is people then come and find us. And then they start exploring, right, okay, so that is how she helps people. Well, actually, I do need a hand with that. But it all began with resonating with something that you said in something, whether that's a publication. And I know you've had this recently because you've just been in Hello magazine. And there were so many people on your thread when you mentioned, like, oh, I've written this article about solo traveling, which was one of the angles that I pulled out for you. And I said, oh, I think that will work really well. And it's one of those things that people will see themselves in something that you've said, and then they'll be like, I'm gonna follow Sandra now. I want to find out more about what she's up to. Oh, she does these awards. Oh, well, I'm gonna come along to the awards, or I'm gonna come along to the networking, or okay, so I've done that, but I hear that she's also a really good speaker coach. So, and I need a bit of a hand with that. So, and that is how PR works. And it's very much about putting yourself out there, telling people how it is that you can help them so that you can impact and change their lives. And I think sometimes we can look at PR as just oh, it's all about me and I'm putting myself out there. And for so many people that I work with, that feels wrong and there's a disconnect. And the reason that feels wrong and there's a disconnect is 9 times out of 10 because you are heart-led and you actually started your business so you can make a difference to others. But actually, PR, media coverage is how you really can make a huge difference to other people's lives, because you're being seen in a bigger way, and then therefore you're able to change other people's lives in a bigger way.
I was running a visibility program last summer, and one of the attendees on that had kept herself hidden because she'd had a trolling experience in the past. And a lot of people, I think, fear speaking on stages, fear putting themselves out there, fear putting themselves out for PR, for fear of being put down or attacked. So what would be your advice in that regard?
Never ever read the comments. 100%, like 100%. And anyone that says, oh yes, no, I won't read the comments, and then they go into that really dark realm of starting to read the comments, you're only going to be doing your mindset a disservice, because people are going to, there's a really good song by Taylor Swift, like, haters are gonna hate. Like, it's going to happen. You're always going to get people that feel negative about something. They're having a bad day, so therefore they lash out about something. You might say something that they don't agree with, so therefore they feel like they need to get on their keyboards and become a warrior and start saying all these things. It's very easy, if you start reading all the comments, to take things personally, and you can't. You have to always bring it back to the fact that you're there to help other people. And you can't be helping other people if you stay hidden. You are doing them and yourself a massive disservice. So never ever read the comments. If someone is trolling you, delete, block. I mean, they do say that you haven't made it until you've got a troll. So look at it that way, that actually you're gaining in popularity. People are starting to find out more about you. But yeah, I'm all about kindness. And I think that actually, in a perfect world, we'd all be lifting each other up. We'd be focusing on the kindness. And if people can't be kind, like, they've got no space in my world, for sure. But where you can, just ignore it or delete and block.
Yeah, great advice there. And I did think myself, oh, who's going to see this? And that was my first thought when the journalist said, oh, we'll do this piece on solo travel. And it was, oh, God, what will people think? But then you've got to stop that and think, well, actually, this is my story. It belongs to me. It doesn't belong to anybody else. It's my story. And that's why when I wrote it, I wanted to give some tips in there as well for other people that would resonate with that and think, well, I've never travelled on my own, but actually she says it's very safe and you can do it in this way. And it just, that's how I felt I needed to write it, in from the perspective of I'm sharing not only I've done this, but also I've done this, but here's what I've learned from the process.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's really important that you can give people added value, and that any added value that you can weave into what it is that you're saying in any piece, it's only ever going to help people more. And it is about that. With PR, we hear lots about the know, like, and trust factor, but the biggest part that you will ever get from PR is the trust. And you have to remember, not everyone gets featured in the national media. It's not a kind of like, oh, you go to your next door neighbor and they're like, oh, I had a front page on the Daily Mirror yesterday. Or you go the other side and they're like, I had a 3-page feature in the Independent. It's not a given that it will happen. PR is a third-party endorsement of what it is that you do via the journalist or the editor. So when you're associated with a different publication, that builds trust with the readers of that publication, or viewers or listeners, or whichever medium you're actually featured in. And what that actually does is, when you've got those real kind of loyal people that every single day they pick up that paper, or every single month they pick up that magazine, or they listen to a certain podcast, and then all of a sudden that you're on there, immediately you are now associated with that medium, and as a result the trust is huge. So you're the expert that's been chosen to speak. You're the expert that's been chosen above all others to talk about solo traveling. And I think it's one of those things that you can underestimate how far this actually goes. But once you start building up all of the media coverage on your website, you start showing the trust tags. They're called media trust tags, but in effect it's the media logos. Yeah. So you need to start working towards those. But once you start saying as featured in, if people come onto your website and they see those, because they should be really high up and very prominent, what it does is it just builds that trust. And there's so many ways that you can also PR your own PR. So once you get PR, it's not a case of just doing, oh, I've been featured in, and then that's it on a social media channel. You need to keep talking about it and keep talking about it so that more people realize, okay, so that was the lady that was featured in Hello, or that was the lady that was featured in Metro. And it really does start building that trust in a quite profound way, almost to the point where if someone goes onto your website and they're looking for, I don't know, a florist, for instance, they go onto your website and then they go onto a nearby competitor. Well, the nearby competitor hasn't said like they've been featured anywhere, but you have, they're going to come to you. And that's what it does.
Yeah. Now, I'm conscious of time, but I can't leave you without talking about books. So you've published children's books yourself, and you've also published your book all about PR. So just remind us what that's called.
So The Power of PR, and it basically breaks everything down into really easy to understand steps.
We'll pop the link in the show notes. But I want to talk about your son, because recently he's published his own book. So tell us a little bit about that and how it came about.
It goes way back to when I was 9. So my dad actually came up with the character called Mug the Wumph. And he used to read, he came up with these fantastical bedtime stories. I don't know where they came from. He was clearly very creative. And I begged him to write the stories down. And he said, oh, go and draw a picture of what you think Mug the Wumph would look like. I drew the picture. It stayed on the garage wall for years. He just never got around to doing it. And I said to him, look, we never did this. And he tried at one point, but this was many years later to actually write it. And it had lost its magic. And so when he passed away in 2016, I was like, no, that is not your legacy. Your legacy is the fact that you gave me the character. I'm going to run with it and I'm going to do this for you. So I sat down and I wrote Mug the Wumph, the Dancing Wizard. And it was out and it was for sale on Amazon. And my little boy, he was 5 at the time, and he came into the office and I said, oh my gosh, I'm so excited. My book's available to buy on Amazon. And he went, I want that. And I was just like, yeah, I'll get you a copy. And he went, no, I want that. I want to be an author like you. And I was like, okay, well, you need to go away and write a story then that is going to work, and we'll find a way to make this a reality for you. And initially, he's 5. He's just learning how to write. He's doing all of the things just at school. We had the wonderful kind of time that was all of the lockdowns. And I know that they were really difficult for so many people. But for him, they were actually a real blessing in that he could sit and do things and come up with things and start his storytelling kind of phase. And then he said to me, we went to Edinburgh Zoo, and this was last October in the half term. He wanted to see the pandas before they went back to China. And he's obsessed with pandas. He loves them. And he basically said to me afterwards, he said, what about a panda? And we'd also seen sloths as well. He said, what about a panda and a sloth and crime fighting agency? I said, I think you're onto something. Go away and sit down and map it out now, how to do a story arc, how to do it all. Go away and come up with everything. And we've been back a couple of weeks. And I'd found a pair of his socks from when he was like a baby, and it must have been like 2 months or something. They were tiny little socks, and I'd found them, and they were red and white striped, and I'd washed them, and I didn't know what I was going to do with them. Probably pop them into a memory box or something along those lines. And he said to me, can I have them? And I was like, well, yeah, if you really want them, what are you going to do with them? And he put them on his toy sloth and he said, sock sloth. And I was like, okay. And he said, he's the main character. And I was like, okay, go on then, go and write it. And you've got until, and I gave him a deadline. And I said, right, you've got until this time. And I didn't think that he was going to actually fulfill it and finish. And lo and behold, beginning of March, he'd finished the entire book and he'd written all, I think it was 15 chapters, and we truncated it down to 12 so that it all made a bit more sense. But yeah, he'd wrote 12 chapters, age 9, and I'd been sat during all of this time where he'd said, ever since he'd come to me and said, I want to be a published author, I've been sat on this idea of Rainbow House Publishing, which was a publishing company for children, books written by children to drive self-belief in other kids. Because if a child can have a book that they've written and they can say, I've got a professionally published book, that drives that self-belief in them so that they know that anything is possible. And then they can take that and then they can do anything that they want in life. There's nothing holding them back because they know that they did that from a young age all the way through. So that's the premise behind it all. And he said to me, right, I'm writing the second one now. And I was like, okay, all right, let's see how you get on. And I said, okay, you've got the 20th of August as your deadline. And lo and behold, beginning of August, it's all written, 17 chapters. And we are talking like 2 pages of A4 per chapter. He's properly mapped it all out, worked it all out, everything. I've yet to read it all, but it's the next book and it will be coming out very soon because he's done all the work. So I have to be able to keep that going for him. But it all came from the fact that my dad didn't. So the fact that my dad didn't, some people would say, well, that wasn't very good. Well, actually, that was my dad's gift to us, because through not doing that, I've then gone on to go, no, we're going to make this a reality. His dream can come true. This is how we do it.
Fantastic. And published author at 9 years old is amazing. I loved the video of him opening his book and just the sheer wonderment in his eyes when he saw it in print in a box in front of him. And the book opening is so important, that box, when you get your whole hands on your first copy. So congratulations to him and to you for launching the publishing company. We've sadly run out of time, but I always ask my guests to leave the audience with a top tip or piece of advice. What would yours be?
Never stop dreaming and never stop believing in yourself that you can do something. There is nothing that you can't do or achieve. You just have to take the steps to get you there. And I know that you're a big fan of this as well, Sandra. Like, obviously, I know your story as well. And it's so important that you never give up on those dreams and you always follow them through.
Fantastic advice. We will share all your links, and there's loads of them, in the show notes. But I would strongly urge anyone listening to have a look at Nicola, NJRPR. Is it .com?
It is. And there's also NicolaRowley.com as well. So the NJRPR.com is for corporate clients, and then NicolaRowley.com is for consultancy, and then membership, courses, all of those kind of things.
And I've done some of your courses and they're amazing. So I've learned so much from you. So thank you for coming on the podcast. It's been great to chat to you. And we'll be back again with Woman Who Chat next week.